In this presentation we are going to deepen the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 12. Sustainable consumption and production. We are going to analyze both of them, since they are strictly connected. In order to answer our central research question, how to deal with the rebound effect, we are going to understand the meaning of the definitions of sustainable consumption and production, focusing on how we can improve the sustainable performance. Sustainable consumption and production policies are a key mechanism for improving living standards without compromising the resource needs of future generations. Such policies aim to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation, increase resource efficiency and promote more sustainable lifestyles. Indeed, sustainable consumption and production is about doing more and better with less.
Plans to take responsibility for sustainable consumption and production have been part of our history since 1972. When the Club of Rome highlighted the contradiction between static stocks of resources and growth in population and consumption. With the adoption of Agenda 2030, from 2015 to 2018, a total of 108 countries have had national policies and initiatives that supported sustainable production and consumption, as shown in the picture. Why is sustainability so important? The ecological footprint measures how fast we consume resources and generate waste, compared to how fast nature can absorb our waste and generate new resources. An ecological deficit occurs when the ecological footprint of a population exceeds the biocapacity of the area available to that population. All the countries that are colored in red in 2017 experienced an ecological deficit. Contrary, an ecological reserve exists when the biocapacity of a region exceeds its population's ecological footprint. In 2017 the countries colored in green were an ecological reserve.
Over the last years our production and consumption choices have become much more sustainable, thanks to the use of innovative technologies. So, products have become more efficient. However, often more efficient products lead to an increase in consumption. Let's make some examples. The production of more fuel-efficient cars allow people to substitute their old cars with bigger ones, which consume less, and, at the same time, smaller cars are affordable for those who didn't even have a car before. Today, instead of one light bulb, we use multiple LED, and in more places. As a consequence, all the sustainability gains achieved with sustainable production may be eliminated by the increase in consumption. So, production and consumption are becoming less sustainable. This is the so-called rebound effect, that involves both production and consumption. To deal with it, we are going to analyze how to improve both sustainable production and consumption.
The life cycle assessment is a fundamental tool to improve production sustainability. The environmental impact of every step of the product life cycle it is measured, from the extraction of raw materials, to the recycle or reuse. It involves 4 steps. First, goal and scope definition help to assess if a life cycle assessment is performed consistently. Second, inventory analysis of extractions and emissions, where all the environmental inputs and outputs associated with a product or service are considered. Third, impact analysis, where the environmental impacts are classified and evaluated. Finally, an interpretation of the data collected is provided. It is important also to include relevant stakeholders in the life cycle assessment, to achieve multi-stakeholder consensus for collaborative joint projects. What about sustainable consumption? How can we improve it? Let's start from the definition. Sustainable consumption means to consume in a way that allows us to preserve our resources and the environment as much as possible. The 6 R's of sustainability aim to reduce the environmental footprint of humanity and have a more sustainable lifestyle. The cycle starts from the rethink consumption, which represents the first step for a sustainable consumption. Rethink means that we should all be more mindful of our consumption habits to limit our impact on the environment. The Ministry of Sustainable Development defines sustainable consumption in 3 dimensions. First, buying better, which means buying greener products. Second, consuming better, which means wasting less and having a more sustainable consumption. Third, throwing away better, taking into account recycling in particular.
The meaning of sustainable consumption and production has been explained, as well as the tools we have to improve them. So, what's next? Now, we are going to analyze two practical examples that will provide you further food for thought. The first example concerns the sustainable production of electric vehicles. We first provide an overview of the EVs market. There were 10 million electric cars on the world's roads at the end of 2020. China, with 4.5 million electric cars, has the largest fleet, followed by USA with approximately 1.8 million. 2020 accounted for 41% increase in EVs registrations over 2019, which were approximately 3 million new electric cars. With 1.4 million new electric cars, for the first time, Europe experienced the largest annual increase. This surge in electric car registrations in Europe, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, reflects two policy measures. First, 2020 was the target year for the European Union's CO2 emissions standards. Second, many European governments increased subsidy schemes for EVs to counter the effects of the pandemic. Finally, we can try to answer to one of the most debated questions of the last years: how green are electric vehicles? EVs do not rely directly on the combustion of fossil fuels to operate, so according to many researches, on average emissions of EV are 50% fewer than traditional vehicles. However, the sources of electricity of EVs differ from country to country, and this leads to different amounts of emissions. As shown in the graph, China electricity supplies are fossil fuel reliant, so in 2018 the electric vehicles sold in China produced 188.5 grams of CO2 emissions per mile, compared to only 2.7 grams per mile in France, where more than 70% of electricity is generated from nuclear power sources. Also, the production of the EV's batteries is not free of greenhouse gas impacts. First, the supply chain of EVs is complex and costly. The structure of the supply chain itself, how far battery materials are shipped from mines to refineries to manufacturing facilities, adds to batteries' life cycle emissions. Second, electric vehicles' batteries need some key raw materials, like lithium, nickel, and cobalt. According to many experts, reserves of cobalt and nickel used in electric vehicle cells in 10 years will not meet future demand. Third, in the Democratic Republic of Congo alone, more than 70% of the world's cobalt is produced. Their human rights impacts are critical. Indeed, governance challenges have allowed corruption and economic inequalities to persist. Moreover, local environmental impacts from EVs battery mining can be acute in some contexts. For example, cobalt mining in Congo can cause water pollution, air quality impacts, and possible radioactive exposure. Growing numbers of electric vehicles present a serious waste management challenge for recyclers at end of life. Currently, globally, it's very hard to get detailed figures for what percentage of lithium-ion batteries are recycled. But the value everyone quotes is about 5%. In some parts of the world it's considerably less. We now consider a second practical example to highlight the relevance of non-governmental organizations, such as Greenpeace, in bringing customers closer to sustainable consumption. Specifically, we are going to talk about two very well-known companies, Lego and Shell. The partnership of Lego with Shell, the oil company, dates back to the 1960s. After 50 years of collaboration, and Shell's plan to drill the Arctic to exploit oil, in 2014 Greenpeace intervened to stop this partnership. Greenpeace posted a viral video in which Lego has been accused to pollute kids' imagination because of its partnership with Shell. Customers were directly addressed to sustain this campaign and save the Arctic. Lego ended Shell's partnership after Greenpeace campaign. Now Lego is involved in sustainable production, realizing its bricks with more innovative and sustainable materials.
Today, our global footprint is about 1.5 times the Earth's total capacity to provide renewable and non-renewable resources to humanity. If nothing changes, in 35 years, with an increasing population that could reach 9.6 billion by 2050, we will need almost 3 planets to sustain our ways of living. We must act now. Sustainable consumption and production are strictly connected to each other. So, in order to deal with the rebound effect, we need to rethink at both the ways we produce and consume. Thank you for watching.